Welcome to this edition of Rattling the Bars. A recent report states that 50% of the women at Danbury Correctional Facility has COVID. Here to talk about this is Wendy and Dawn. Thank y'all for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Give us a little background on the Danbury prison. Is it a federal prison or is it a state prison? Either one of y'all can take it.
It's a federal facility that houses men and women. They have both a camp, a medium for women, and a medium for men, low and medium for men.
How many women are housed there?
Currently in the camp, there were 84 people. When we were there, it was a little over 100 people.
84 people? Okay.
Yes.
What are the conditions that the women are living under, Wendy?
Well, it's been very difficult right now because in the best of times, the facilities at Danbury are rather run down and in serious need of repair. Honestly, the whole place needs to be bulldozed. It would never pass any sort of structural health inspection, construction, anything like that. So right now they're in conditions where not only are they isolated and put into quarantine rooms, but they often do not have adequate heat. They don't have hot water a lot of times. And I don't mean the hot water goes off now and then. I mean, the majority of the time it's off, and it's not because somebody's flipping a switch for punishment or anything. It's just the facility is that old, decrepit, and run down. So they are quarantined, segregated from one another in different units. And then on top of it, they've got these decrepit facilities that they have to deal with. And then when the food comes, it's brought from, because there are 3 prisons on the same grounds. And so when the food is coming now, they're not cooking for themselves anymore. It's coming from one of the other facilities, and they're in styrofoam boxes. And a lot of times by the time you get it from one building to another, it's cold and, it's been moved around a lot. So it's all mixed up. And I mean, that may sound small, but it actually, you mix like meat with some applesauce, it's not a good thing. It's difficult for them to have any kind of just adequate care. And you're talking about people that are sick with COVID here. So,
right.
Yeah, it's difficult for them. And then on top of it, because of the way they're quarantined, they haven't had very much access, especially definitely not consistent access to email, telephones, video visits. That's all been cut off. And, obviously the families are very worried about them, because you don't get any news of that. In other prisons, like I know someone right now who's at Federal Medical Center in Rochester in the men's facility there. And in their unit, they have telephones and computers. So they're able to be locked down and still communicate with the outside world. But at Danbury, you have to leave your unit to go to the telephones and the computers. So nobody's able to go to them because they can't keep them separate from one another.
Right.
Yeah. So it's been really difficult on their families.
Right. Why do you think there are so many cases of COVID in Danbury?
Because there's no ability to have 6 feet distancing. You're in a cubicle for the camp. You're in a cubicle with one bunkmate. There's not even 6 feet between you and the person that you share that bunk with. And each bunk is literally like office cubicles, one next to the other. In the men's facilities, in the other women's facilities, the women down the hill in the medium, they live in one big room, literally. Their cubicle walls are half walls. So you could see from one place to the other and everybody's breathing all over each other. And so there's just no way for them to properly distance. That was the whole point in pushing to get people out of Danbury when we had the court order under Judge Shea that they could release as many people as possible under CARES Act, because it's impossible for them to do what's right to ensure that people are safe.
And as you speak of the CARES Act, what is the administration doing to remedy this?
The administration has done very little. The first group of people that got released didn't get released because they properly used CARES Act. They got released because we literally sued in the Connecticut court, and it was an order issued that made them have to let people go without the parameters of how much time they had and all the other minor things that they were trying to take into consideration. That settlement agreement expired in October, and we only know of one person that has left the facility under CARES Act since the expiration of that order. For the camp, it's really no reason for people to be there. If you made it to the camp, you're already low or minimum in most cases. To be in a camp, you have to be considered secure because there are no locked doors and all of those various things. You could really walk off the premises. So the idea that those folks can't be transferred to home confinement is really silly. There's no barriers that prevents them from doing it outside of BOP it's a prison. It's meant to confine people. And so they look at every possible way to keep somebody inside versus every possible way to release them.
Right. And in terms of what's going on the outside, who's occupying that space to try to highlight this and bring this to over in your cells?
Okay, so in the community, we're actually pretty lucky. There's been several different groups. There's one of them is the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. They've been helping a lot. At different times, the ACLU has been involved as well. And, there's no way that I could say enough about how much work and effort the people at Families Against Mandatory Minimums, have done. Like, they've all been advocating and trying to talk to politicians, legislators, even the president, to try to get something done here and in the administrations. But it's not just them either. There's groups of legal advocacy clinics in the Quinnipiac Law School and in Yale also. And there's even a couple of places that, and I hesitate to name them because I don't know how much they want it known that they want it done, but they know who they are, and they'll appreciate the shout out. But there've been a couple law firms that have stuck their neck out and tried to file some actions to try to get some more information out of there so that we can have statistics and numbers so that when we go in public and say, hey, they could be releasing a lot more. Well, how do you know that? How many people? Well, because their statistics say so. And we're waiting on those statistics right now, but we know that they're there because we've talked to the people inside who they're absolutely CARES eligible. They should be out.
In addition, we've had Color of Change that has been working with us for almost a year now on various priorities. They have a petition out right now relevant to Danbury. You could find it on their Color of Change website. And we've also had some involvement from the Ladies of Hope ministry. So not to try to leave anybody out.
Yeah, right. I don't even know all of the groups. So thank you, Dawn, for chipping in on them.
Okay, but we do have a vast and a broad network of people supporting the women at Danbury. How are the women, how are their spirits in regard to what's going on with them?
I think everybody's frustrated right now. We know more could be done by the administration and BOP, and they're just not doing it. We've had several actions over the last year and a half. When we first came out last year, we organized a protest to highlight the conditions that were still going on, and the fact that even with the judge's order, they were slow to release people, and it's just continued. So I think right now, if you were to talk to any advocate or entity, we would all say the same thing. They could do a lot more, and they're just not. And so we're going to continue to put the pressure on them, hoping that at some point somebody will make a decision that is right, and that is to release as many people as possible so that they could lessen the spread of COVID and keep people safe.
Right. And what can the general public do? We know that we got this vast network as you outlined, but what can the general public do to heighten the attention about the conditions that the women of Danbury are undergoing at this time?
I'm going to start, Wendy, you could chime in, but you could start with signing that petition. You can call your local U.S. Congress and senators who have legislative authority over BOP and the Department of Justice. You can call BOP and complain. There are many Facebook pages with actions, and there are even some protests being planned. If they just plug into the network, they would get information as we move forward. On Facebook, we have a page, Don't Send Them Back, and I'll let Wendy take it from there because she could explain.
Okay. So in addition to all those things, it's one of the things that I think is really difficult when you're somebody who's still inside is you feel completely cut off from the rest of the world, even though you do have some email or phone privileges, although the women of Danbury don't really have them very consistently right now. It's not the unimpeded communication that people have the liberty to enjoy when they're outside, obviously. So it feels very alone. It feels like people are just going on with their lives and don't care about you. So, if you have people who are inside, send them letters, for goodness sakes, and there are several groups that you can get involved with that, will match you with people. There's this wonderful journalist. She's on Twitter a lot, but she's very, very prominent and had stuff published nationwide, Carrie Blakinger, and she will hook you up with people who need books. Because, that's the best way to pass time ever. She's got a whole list of people and books that they would love to have sent to them. And you can do things like that, if you want to help somebody like directly just to lift their spirits up. We do have a group. When Dawn and I got out, one of the things that we noticed right away was that people were in danger of being sent back. Now that we did all this work to get out, we certainly didn't want to be sent back, right? So we formed a group called Don't Send Us Back. There's a website, don'tsendusback.org, and it connects to all our various social media. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we have the website itself, and we just coordinate with one another, and tell each other things like, be careful to make sure you answer all your calls when they call, be careful that you don't use mouthwash that has alcohol in it. Make sure you check your mouthwash because that can be problematic if you just brush your teeth and then you go do a breathalyzer, things like that. And also just helping people navigate the bureaucracy sometimes of making sure that they stay out. And in addition, because we know how blessed we are, literally, to be out, how extremely lucky we are, privileged, straight up, to be out. We also spend time, keeping track of the people who are still inside and finding out what we can do. A lot of us, because we got out the way we did, we have a lot of legal contacts, so we help them. We try to point lawyers to situations where they need help and where they might need even more help. Like the people at Alderson right now are going through it in a horrible way, absolutely like human rights violation level stuff. And we've, tried to reach out to help them in any way that we can in the same way. So these are the things that you can do. But one of the best things that you can do that impacts the most, honestly, is call your congressional reps and your senators, because they're the ones who have the influence over the BOP. And, they're the ones who do things like have the Judiciary Committee meetings where they drag them in there and they ask them questions and they have to answer to them. And so if you're writing your representative saying like, hey, this is important to me, that helps. It really does.
Okay, good. Why do you think that the women's prisoners are being subjected to such harsh treatment, unlike the men?
I think the men organize better. Up until us in Danbury, there had not been a contingent of women that really stuck together around an issue. We organized while we were inside. So things that we didn't like, we came together to not go to the cafeteria or various things like that the men are excellent at. But the women are not normally as good at it. And so that leaves some room, because when the men start acting up, they immediately cave and give them what they want, but they're not accustomed to the women coming together. So I know it had been done years ago, and we brought it back while we were there. And we continue to try to tell the people who are inside now through their families and loved ones how they can, come together so that they can continue to fight, what information to send out so that we can try to be helpful to them. But I think it's just a lack of people really understanding what prisons represent. These camps get nicknamed as, Camp Cupcake and all of these different things, when in all reality, they are horrible situations and places. They lack medical care. They lack cleaning supplies. You have bathrooms with mold and mildew. You have conditions that are just deplorable. No human person should live there. And so the idea that you are because you're at a camp, some luxury. I know my image of what a camp was, having never gone to prison, was totally different than my experience. And I would imagine that many people think the same thing. And so just getting people to really understand what it represents, and how bad the conditions are, because it's unfathomable when you really think about it.
Thank you. Any final thoughts that y'all want to share with the public? And y'all can split it up and give us your insights on what you want to share with the public.
I would love to see as many people as possible write letters, call their congressional and their Senate candidates, join FAM, Color of Change, some of those organizations that are helping us, so that you can continue to stay on the list and get information as we move forward with whatever we're doing, petitions. Sometimes we have Facebook chats, etc. And if you have a loved one there or know somebody there, please not only stay in touch with them, but if you get information that could be helpful as we organize, you can find both Wendy and I on Facebook and or on Twitter. And we welcome you sharing whatever information that will help us continue to stay in contact with the women and men inside and to move forward with the issues that they're having.
Yeah.
And Wendy?
In addition to all that, which I absolutely agree with too, one thing that I really want people to understand, though, is that this is not just a Danbury issue. Like, we're not even 3 weeks into the year yet, and already 3 women from Alderson have died from COVID. Like, Camp Cupcake, are you kidding me? Like, this is serious. And what's really tragic is there's at least 2 of them that I think might have been CARES eligible and definitely would have been very much closer to their out dates had their first step credits been applied in a timely manner. And yet they were stuck in that prison to get that. And here's the thing, people say like, well, you can get COVID outside too. Absolutely you can. And you can also choose your treatment. You can choose when you want to seek out medical assistance. You can choose what kind of medication you do or don't want to take. You are in charge of things. When you are incarcerated, you are at the mercy of whoever thinks that you are sick enough to go to the hospital or not, sick enough to merit care or not. And it must be stated, there is a presumption underlying everything involving incarceration that the inmate is lying. Okay, that is the first thing that they start with assuming. So if you go to them and you say, I'm sick, I'm hurt, somebody beat me up, somebody treated me wrong, my rights are being violated, the first thing that any staff member or administrative person, whether it be the BOP or the government, thinks is the inmate is lying. So when you're sick and miserable and you need health care and you say, I'm dying, send me to the hospital, they think you're saying it for attention. They think you're saying it just because you want to go somewhere on a field trip, so they ignore you until they're really sure. That's where you get the stories of women giving birth in jail cells. It's like that. And I really want people to understand that also that these people that we're talking about in the federal prison camps, Dawn mentioned it earlier, that there are no locks, there are no fences, and they are still staying there in these deplorable conditions because they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to get more charges. They don't want to get, brought back by the marshals. They're afraid to get in trouble. They're trying to follow the rules. And they're staying there for that. So you're going to tell me that they're a danger in the community? Are you serious right now? Come on. So we've got to get these people out. There's no reason they shouldn't be in the communities.
And you take a place like Danbury, the camp specifically, there is no nurse or doctor assigned there every day from some time period. They have a person that comes in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening to give out medicine and take sick calls. But there's no person physically there. So if something happens to you, you have to wait for them to even call medical to come up to the building. Depending on who determines what the priority is, depends on how long it takes. We've had scenarios where women I had an allergic reaction to peanuts while I was inside, and it took them literally about 2 hours to get a person up. Thankfully, I was not dying, but I had already turned beet red. I was starting to break out. And the idea that you have to wait on medical without somebody really even assessing how serious it is. And if you look at today's COVID statistics on BOP, they reached their highest numbers since the pandemic started of COVID positive staff and inmates. So that means they didn't learn anything from a year plus ago when we started this. And so they have to be willing to do something different. And unless we demand it, it's not going to happen.
One last question. Why do you think the BOP is so reluctant to let these women go? As you outlined, the lesser security and the lesser security, they can literally walk away. Why do you think the BOP is so harsh on not wanting to let these women go?
I remind people every day that BOP is responsible for keeping a person incarcerated. Their job, their correction officers, their staff is paid as a function of the number of inmates. A lot of them have that same attitude of you should just shut up and do your time. They don't care about conditions, et cetera. Much like we talk about that code blue within police departments, they have some of those same codes within correction facilities. And so you don't have any rights. You're not perceived as a person. You're literally perceived as a number. Your registration number is what you are known by in most cases. And so it really dehumanizes the person that is sitting there incarcerated and what should be done for them versus what is.
Well, I think one of the first things that should be done is that the BOP needs to be ordered to release anybody who is CARES eligible. I don't understand why it's even a question. Most of the prisons looked at the CARES Act and from what we can see, just thought of it as optional, considering how many people we've run into, family members who have contacted us says, why isn't my person out? They've got, this much time in, they've never had a shot. They're low risk on their recidivism score. Why aren't they out? Well, I don't know. They just don't want to, and people have filed, the forms requesting to be evaluated for CARES home confinement and gotten a note back from the warden saying well, we don't have COVID here right now, so we're not going to do that. In another facility, the warden replied that even though there was COVID there at the moment, they were perfectly fine handling it there themselves, so they didn't need to use CARES. It's this wasn't a choice. You're supposed to be doing this. Congress gave you a direct order.
Right. And Dawn, what's your final thought?
I believe we need to take it one step further and we need to look at how we decarcerate these prison systems as a whole. Prisons were never designed for women, and so they shouldn't be there. In most cases, there are alternatives. We need to look at mental health counseling. We need to look at drug treatment programs. We need to look at the reasons why our women are ending up being incarcerated, and let's change the system. And in the cases where people make mistakes, let's find alternatives. There are community outlets that could be utilized to keep people on the outside. They've used home confinement effectively for 18 months for many of us who were released. We had the lowest recidivism rate in history. And so that shows that it can be done. It's proven that you can release people and your community still be safe and they not end up being violated, et cetera. And so let's use that more to look at alternatives to jail cells for women.
There you have it. Dawn and Wendy are Rattling the Bars. Thank you for joining us in this edition of Rattling the Bars. We appreciate your support for these women of Danbury, for these two women that are doing remarkable work on behalf of incarcerated people throughout the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having us on the show, for caring about the issue, and for your entire team. We look forward to coming back again, hopefully on another subject that won't be, because we're going to fight to free our women and our men from this process.
Yes, thank you.
On behalf of Eddie and myself, we appreciate you for participating in this episode of Rattling the Bars. Thank you very much.